yesterday, as we were kind of celebrating at the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the greatest experiment related to human freedom the world has ever seen up to that point. And while I'm not an expert on the subject, the founding of America and the beginning of a country built on the idea that people could rule themselves instead of there being a king or a ruler or a governor governing the people of the country, the people themselves would govern, giving the opportunity for freedom to be the experience of those living in this country. And, you know, we probably all agree, I'm sure we all agree, that the ideals of democracy, are far from perfected in our collective experience as a nation. Each of us as individuals are kind of on our own path to be as free as we possibly can be. And for most of us, our freedom is not limited by external forces as much as it is limited by our own fears, our own beliefs, our own ideas of limitation, and giving our power away to entities outside of ourselves. So my prayer for freedom really affirmed freedom in these areas. We have freedom of thoughts and beliefs. We have our hearts and our actions and our choices are free. And throughout this summer, I have chosen lessons in spirituality, ideas and concepts to introduce that are intended to lead each person participating to greater personal freedom, or as the Constitution puts it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I've shared many times that my three big words in life are freedom, fulfillment, and abundance. Those three words are written on a little sticky note that's not sticky anymore, but it's laying in there in my office where that chocolate candy is. Thank you very much. But the freedom is one of my big three words. So this is a word that I care a lot about, and I try to share about it in a lot of different ways. So let's talk about kind of where we've come from this summer, okay? So we started this summer quest with a reminder that we have the freedom to be in personal relationship with the God of our understanding, God itself. In every time we step into nature, it is present. And that presence in nature is where we can turn for evidence of the power all around us. If internal peace is challenged, we can return to the peace of a sunrise or a sunset. You know, the ocean moves freely, birds fly freely, clouds shift freely. In other words, my nature is to be free, and Spirit is constantly reminding me of that truth every time I step outside. My practice is to notice these reminders of freedom. And then we reminded ourselves that we are free to create daily habits that support our mental well-being, our spiritual well-being, our internal sense of freedom. We have the freedom to start our day mindfully. 2 minutes, right? 2 minute pause. And to connect with others in positive ways through conversation and compliments. And we are free to move every single day physically, free to notice the little moments in life that give us joy. We have the ability to self-identify as a person who takes care of their own freedom, because we learn that personal freedom comes with personal responsibility to own the quality of our own lives every single day. And then we talked about the idea of setting ourselves free from our bondage to technology, right? We took a hard look at the reality of how much time we have given to staring at a small screen instead of feeling the freedom of real life and the vastness of the life happening around us in every moment. We decided collectively to choose real life connections, real life learning, real life experiences instead of watching other people live on our phones. And now that felt like some freedom to me, right? As those hours are ticking down in my stats, I really love that. And this past week, we've been thinking about how free we are to determine our own inner state of mind. Sure, we can let everything out there determine if we're having a good day, or we can claim the freedom for ourselves to determine the goodness of our day. From day to day existence, self-determination is freedom. And so here we are, walking the freedom path a little further with a new lesson for our summer. And as I've said before, I'm introducing you to ways that spirituality changed my own life in an endeavor to help you expand and make your life even better. And there are two big parts of my experience that changed the most through the science of mind, through this philosophy that I want to explore over the next 2 weeks. The first is financial freedom, and the second is peace and freedom in relationships. So matter of fact, I care so much about these two subjects that I spent an entire summer program on each of them. So if you were with us in 2024, we had the Summer of Love. That was fun. And we really explored relationships and connections and how we can have freedom in those. And then last year in 2025, we spent a whole summer, it was called the Summer Shower of Abundance, and we turned the topic of financial freedom every which way to up-level our personal relationship with prosperity. So these next 2 weeks are going to touch on these two subjects, these topics, and we're going to keep freeing ourselves as you hear from two of the contemporary teachers that I have learned from mightily. So this week, I'm going to introduce you to a teacher named Edwene Gaines. How many of you have ever heard of Edwene Gaines? Okay, good. Some people have, yay. So let me tell you a little bit about Edwene. So you're ready. Buckle up. So I was first introduced to Edwene Gaines in Seattle within just a few months of walking into a CSL for the first time. And maybe it was her Alabama twang, because I'm kind of partial to that, but maybe that's what spoke to like my southern homesick heart. I live way out there in Seattle, but whatever it was, she got my attention in a big way, as pretty much the only thing she goes around the country teaching about is the spirituality of money and how it works. And Edwene Gaines is fantastic. I've taken workshops that she's offered. I even went to a retreat at her Alabama facility like for several days to really dive into her teaching. I've seen her speak so many times. She's not traveling anymore. I would probably try to get her here, but I don't think she travels much anymore. She's kind of old now, but at any rate, most importantly, I have aligned my life in many, many, many ways to her spiritual practices, and I've shared them kind of over the years with you all as well. And then since I'm not speaking next Sunday, I'm going to share a preview of the next week's Summer Teacher 2, and that is Brene Brown. So most of you are familiar with Brene Brown, but if you're not, you don't know her work, she's this contemporary spiritual wisdom teacher from Texas. And she's an expert on all things related to emotional freedom, resilience, healing shame, fearless living. And this particular lesson that I'm introducing from Brene Brown is about finding peace in unresolved relationships. And that topic was really important to me in my early spiritual path of learning, but also in my recent life too. So what I find interesting is that both of these teachers, even though their areas of expertise seem completely unrelated, both of them talk about one thing that is central to our own personal freedom. They both teach the power of forgiveness. So Edwene talks about setting ourselves free financially, and Brene talks about setting ourselves free interpersonally. And they both point to the path of forgiveness as the only way to get there. Why? What is so spiritually powerful about forgiveness, and how does it set us free? So I have some thoughts to share about that. So we are energetic beings, okay? We are energy. If you're reading The Untethered Soul with us, you are getting that message pretty loudly too. You are energy. Everything is energy. We're channels through which universal energy flows. Whatever the energy of God is, whether you call it life or love or peace or joy or resources or creativity, ideas, light, all good things, whatever, that is the energy that flows. And whatever that energy is, that is our energy too. And that divine energy flows through us internally with every breath we take. It flows through our thoughts, it flows through our emotions, and it flows through our actions. That power is our source. So if you think about it, and we're a channel of energy, this flow of energy, we control the strength of that flow. When we are wide open, the flow of energy is strong and abundant, bringing every good thing with it. You've heard the phrase, I'm in the flow. I'm in the flow. Don't bother me. I'm in the flow. We all want to be in the flow, don't we? It actually could be the definition of freedom. I feel free when I am in the flow. And let us remember that the flow is the flow of all good things, all resources, including Brene Brown's love and Edwin Gaines's money. Those two things are in that flow. But as I said, when we're wide open, it flows mightily. So what blocks the flow? Think about it. What blocks your flow? What blocks the flow is fear and all the words we use to describe fear. Fear is like a kink in the hose of life. And let's remember that fear's got a lot of names. Resentment, cynicism, regret, shame, anger, grudges. You could probably name them several more. That's fear taking all of its different forms. Now, when I first came to spirituality, I was all clogged up, man. I was like all clogged up. I had so many unresolved relationships. So I really feared love. And if spirituality is about anything, it's about seeing our connections as being open with every single person as we explore the topic of oneness. The truth of spirituality, the basic truth is oneness. So if you're all blocked up like I was, blocked up, I don't want anything to do with any of that, just blocking that flow. Brene Brown said this, spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. So being wide open is when that power is flowing all around us as love and compassion. And what I found was blocking my connections to other people and to the power itself was my fear being held so firmly in place. So I resented so many people related to my divorce back then. This was 25 years ago. I was cynical about how life worked, and I felt everything was manipulated by powers beyond my control. Can you relate? I regretted so many of my life choices. We were talking about that in Sacred Cup this morning. I felt deep personal shame. I was holding so many grudges, and I was angry at how unraveled my life felt. Yeah, at 36, this is when I found this. I was really struggling with fear in all of its forms, all clogged up. The energy of good resources had a hard time going around all that mess to break through for me. Can anyone relate to feeling all clogged up? Okay, good. And guess what? It was about that time that I heard Edwin Gaines for the first time. And since I was a single mom trying to raise my daughter independently, she got my attention on the topic of money. But one of her 4 big lessons was about the power of forgiveness and how it could open up the flow to all good things. She explained spirituality would describe forgiveness as kind of like spiritual Drano, right? Forgiveness is the path to freedom. So I like to describe it like this. As we go through our lives, we have experiences that steal our power and trap our energy in the past. As we move forward, our energy stays in the past. So like some examples, like we get bullied or mistreated at school, and some of our energy sits in that memory swirling around. And because our energy is sitting there, our brains go back there and we think about it, right? Then we fail, let's say we fail a course in college and we despise the teacher, but we really despise our lab partner that helped us mess it up really bad, right? More trapped energy. Then our early relationships, in the way all early relationships do, in difficult and hurtful ways, because that's just how those end. Then we have a financial loss, a financial crisis, and we experience deep shame over how we perhaps didn't handle our affairs in the best way. And then we forgot to exercise and found that we found our peace in like carb overload. And we put on 20 pounds and we start to despise ourselves for that. And then our company reorganizes and we're back on the difficult path of finding a new job, and we're angry at our old supervisor, and then the wrong party wins, and then things start happening on the news that are dissatisfying energy deposits. They're just spread all over the place. And I can tell you, by the time I was 36, I had a lot of my power lost in the past, just sitting in the laps of people and situations from long ago. But since I was still thinking about all of those things, and my emotional energy was visiting them in my mind on a regular basis, my flow was a tangled knot going between the regret of the past and fear and worry about the future. It was all just a mess, right? Forgiveness work is about doing whatever we need to do to retrieve our lost personal energy that's sitting in the past. And for me, it was really helpful to learn some big spiritual concepts that could kind of overlay my whole past so I didn't have to go get it all individually. So here are a few of those big things I learned. The first thing that helped me was to contemplate the spiritual truth that life is a classroom. And that if I'm going to learn how to be the best person I can be while I'm alive, there's going to be some required curriculum experiences that reveal where I'm still learning and what I still need to master. And I could forgive the younger versions of myself for not knowing what she didn't know yet. And while I was forgiving the younger version of myself, I could also let the other players involved off the hook about being clueless for the things they didn't know either. The truth alone, that one truth alone, applied to so many of my memories, and it freed up a ton of my energy flow. Like, everybody did the best they could do. I remember a friend of mine said to my ex back then, could you give her an Oscar for playing the role so well instead of hating her so bad? Because she played her role perfectly for you to learn that you're free of that. Right? So it was a really different way of looking at it. And I found more forgiveness when I was taught that everyone does the best they can do with what they know and they have. Maya Angelou reminded me that when you know better, you do better, right? Well, that went for me and for everyone else. And that awareness gave me more freedom. I would have an old memory kind of float by in my thoughts, and I'd remind myself, you know, they did the best they could. You did the best you could that day. I can release my need to try to show them how wrong they were, right? And then another big opportunity for forgiveness was when I found was to realize that just because things didn't go the way I would have preferred them to go, didn't mean that they were wrong. Just because they led me down a different path than I thought I was going to go, didn't mean that was the wrong path, right? Different paths were not the easy path I preferred, but who I am today meant that I had to go down that exact path to get to where I am today. Big things are not usually learned on the easy path. So those kinds of big blanket truths about forgiveness really helped set me free to a great degree once I grasped them. But since I really wanted to unblock my flow, then I had to do that nitty-gritty forgiveness work of going back and retrieving my energy from the past in those individual situations that I had a harder time letting go of. So one of Edwin Gaines's most memorable lessons for me was the Bible scripture about forgiving 70 times 7. So she took that really literally, y'all. At the retreat I went to, here's what she had us do. She had us make a list of people that we really had a hard time forgiving. And as you can imagine, people were writing down some really big things. You know, someone who murdered their friend or abused their child or abandoned them or betrayed them or big stuff, right? And then she guided us to write a forgiveness sentence for each one of those people on our list. And that sentence had to include a compassion phrase. And one of mine was something like this: I forgive my unhealed father for his uncontrolled anger and violence. Okay, so that was a forgiveness statement, something like that. And you would think I could remember it word for word since I worked with it a lot, but it was quite a few years ago. And I wrote others, but this time in my forgiveness work, by this time I had grown a lot, so my list was short. But then for the next 7 days, we were to take one of our sentences and write them out by hand 70 times. I forgive my father, I forgive my, you're right. Then after those 7 days, we were to take a different sentence from our list and write it 70 times for the next 70 days. So I can tell you, by the time you write something down 490 times and had 490 forgiving and compassionate thoughts about that person, something breaks inside of you and love begins to flow again. Freedom within you expands and breathing feels a bit easier as you open up. So forgiveness work is what helps us retrieve our energy and our power from the past. And we bring it all to this present moment where we can use it, right? If it's sitting in the past, we can't use it. But if it's here, it's ours to use. So if you're feeling stuck in any way in your life, I guarantee you that you have unresolved situations from the past that are clogging your channel of good things flowing. And if you find yourself ruminating on conversations and choices that happened yesterday or 10 years ago or 25 years ago, the path to freedom involves retrieving your energy from those moments through forgiveness. And most of the time, when I'm working with someone in a personal session and we start talking about one of those situations, we discover a new perspective or a new way of looking at the circumstances, and I can almost feel that knot untangling as the energy starts to flow in the memory and clear out the old pain and disappointment. Nothing about the past changes. Quite frankly, it is only the current experience of it that shifts. Nothing about the past changes except the story we tell ourselves about it. And when we change our thoughts and when we change our current story, we change our lives and we change the energy flow happening right now. But it takes practice. This is what Edwin Gaines says. True freedom requires that we be awake and aware, and we must choose constantly every day to stay on the right track and avoid slipping back into old ways of thinking and behaving. You must forgive everyone all the time, especially yourself. So what I have done over the past 25 plus years is walk this freedom path, practicing compassion and forgiveness for myself and others. And the miracle of that is that the energy channel in my life is open. Resources flow, love flows, joy flows. Peace is what I get to breathe when I feel that inner freedom, financial peace and relationship peace. So Edwin and Brene both have their own unique Southern accents and wisdom to bring to this topic, and they share the impact that these ideas have on our financial lives and our relationship lives. And we're going to talk about their wisdom, how to apply it in our own experiences over the next 2 weeks. So here's the deal. We all have a financial life that we're working to improve. If you don't, let's talk. But most of us do. so that we can experience greater prosperity and abundance and freedom. And we all have relationships that remain unresolved in our hearts. Sure, some of us are at the beginning of our spiritual journey, just beginning to do this work, this journey of healing those big subjects. And some of us in the room have been practicing and tweaking and studying and healing for many years, including these past 2 summers we worked on these topics. But here we are, together, summer of 2026, meeting in this moment to do a little more work together, to look at a few more rocks in our path that are blocking our flow, and to partner with Spirit to claim some higher ground. Remember, when we find freedom within ourselves, those around us feel more freedom too. And collectively, we free the country that we live in and the world that we share just a little bit more.